a sample writing assignment number 1 that's similar to the actual writing assignment number 1 that you'll have to submit. Okay, there are 2 parts to this. Part 1 is this: a total of 12 gumballs were placed in a container. 7 are red, 5 are white. 2 gumballs will be drawn out of the container without replacement. So the key word here is without replacement, meaning that the gumball will be taken out of the container and will not be replaced. And there are 3 parts here to draw a tree diagram representing the 2 gumballs drawn without replacement, and you're to label the probabilities along each branch and list all the possible outcomes as well as their probabilities. So here, this is going to be without replacement. So on the first pull, you're either going to pull out a red or white gumball. So here the R is for the red and W is for white. Okay, now there's 7 red gumballs and 5 white gumballs. So if you add the 2 together, 7 plus 5, you're going to get 12. So the probability of selecting a red gumball will be 7 out of 12. And the probability of selecting a white gumball will be 5 out of 12. Okay, so now, either you're selecting a red gumball or a white gumball, but keep in mind without replacement, meaning that that gumball will not be put back in the container. So that means you'll be down to 11 gumballs on the second pull. So here on the second pull, you're going to pull either a red gumball or a white gumball if the red gumball was first drawn out, or if the white gumball was pulled out first, you're either going to select on the second pull a red gumball or a white gumball. Okay, but on the second pull, there's only going to be 11. Okay, now let's find the probability of selecting a red gumball on the second draw if a red gumball was taken out on the first pull. So now if the first gumball that you drawn out was red, so now you have 6 gumballs to choose from out of 11. So that probability is dropped to 6 over 11. And if the red gumball is drawn first, you'll still have 5 white balls out of 11. So now that probability then is 5 out of 11. And then second, if a white gumball is drawn, you're now going to have 7 red balls and 4 white balls. So if the first gumball drawn was white, then the probability of the second gumball being red will be 7 out of 11. And then the probability of drawing a white gumball, given that the first gumball that you drawn out was white, is now 4 out of 11. Okay, that's the first gumball that you drew out was white. That means that there are going to be 4 white gumballs left out of 11. So it's 4 out of 11. Okay, so that's what the tree diagram looks like. Now let's look at the outcomes, all the possible outcomes. The outcomes are you're going to have a red and a red, and then a red and a white, then a white and a red, and then white and white. Okay, so those are the 4 possible outcomes. Now let's look at their probabilities here. To find out what the probabilities for each one of these, we multiply the probabilities that are along these branches. So for a red and a red, it's going to be 7 twelfths times 6 elevenths, which will be equivalent to 7 over 22 if you reduce this in simplest form. The probability of a red and a white, that's 7/12 times 5/11. Multiply straight across, you're going to get 35 over 132. And then for a white and a red, that's going to be 5/12 plus 7/11. 5/12 times 7 over 11. That's 35 over 132. And then a white and a white, that's going to be 5/12 times 4/11, which will be in simplest form 5 over 33. Okay, so those are the outcomes with their respective probabilities. And this is what the tree diagram looks like. Now we're going to use that tree diagram to answer the other two questions. So this tree diagram is just part A. Part B is this. They want the probability of selecting a red gumball and a white gumball. Okay, so now the probability of a red and a white means this. You want the probability of selecting red, white, or white, red. That's basically what that means. Because a red and a white gumball could be these two options, a red and a white or a white and a red. And in this case, you're going to add those individual probabilities here. That's the probability of selecting a red and a white, plus the probability of selecting a white and a red. Now, from that tree diagram, the probability of selecting a red and a white was 35 over 132. Plus the probability of selecting a white and a red, that was also 35 over 132. So if we add those two probabilities together, here the denominators are the same. We can add the numerators. So you'll have 70 over 132. And if you reduce this by dividing the numerator and the denominator by 2, you're going to get 35 over 66. So the probability of selecting a red and a white ball is just simply, in simplest form, 35 over 66. Okay, now part C, you're asked what's the probability of selecting two red gumballs. Okay, so here we want the probability of selecting two red gumballs, which is the same as saying the probability of a red and a red. Well, there's only one outcome for that, a red and a red, and its probability came out to be 7 over 22. So the probability of selecting two red gumballs, that's simply 7 out of 22. Okay, so this is an example of part A when you're drawing items out of a container without replacement. Okay, and notice that you have to draw the tree diagram like this. Okay, now part B, well, actually, question number 2. You're going to refer to the first problem that we just did and suppose that two gumballs are drawn out of the container with replacement. That means that you're going to draw the first gumball out and then put it back in the container and draw the second gumball out of the container, which means that you're still going to have 7 red and 5 white for a total of 12 in the container each time that you draw out of that container. This time I'm going to draw a tree diagram representing the two gumballs drawn with replacement. And then you're going to label the probabilities along each of the branches of that tree diagram, and then list all the possible outcomes as well as their probabilities. So here, I'm going to say this is part B. And this is the first pull. Of course, you're going to pull out either a red or a white. Now, those probabilities are still going to be the same because you still have 7 red balls out of 12. So the probability of pulling a red ball is 7 out of 12. And the probability of pulling a white ball is still 5 out of 12, as in the last problem. Okay, now this is with replacements on the second pull. You're still going to have 12 balls to choose from. So here, red and a white, and for this situation, also red and white. Each one of those will still have the same probabilities as the first pull. So if it's a red ball, then the probability of getting a second red ball will be still 7 out of 12. And the probability of pulling a white ball is still 5 out of 12. And the same will be for this branch here. 7/12 and also 5/12. Okay, because it's with replacement, because after you either pull out a red or a white ball on the first pull, that ball is going back in the box, or back in the container. Your outcomes are still the same. Red and a red, red and white, white and red, white and white. But their probabilities is going to be different. So now, for a red and a red, the probabilities will be 7/12 times 7/12, which is 49 over 144. And then a red and a white, this will be 7/12 times 5/12. That's 35 over 144. And then a white and a red, 5/12 times 7/12. That's 35 over 144. And a white and a white, 5/12 times 5/12. That's 25 over 144. Okay, now we can use this tree diagram to answer, and actually it's problem number 2. This is part A of problem number 2. Part B is what we need to answer. The probability of selecting a red gumball and a white gumball. Okay, here's the problem here. What's the probability of selecting a red gumball and a white gumball? So it's these options. A red and a white, or a white and a red. Okay, so here we're going to add those individual probabilities. The probability of selecting a red and a white, plus the probability of selecting a white and a red. Okay. Okay. A probability of selecting a white and a red, red and a white. That's 35 over 144. Plus the probability of selecting a white and a red. That's also 35 over 144. And if we add those two, you get 70 over 144. Well, 70 over 144 will be reduced to 35 over 72. So the probability of selecting a red gumball and a white gumball will be 35 over 72. Okay, and finally, part C of problem number 2. What's the probability of selecting 2 red gumballs? Okay, what's the probability of selecting 2 red gumballs, which is represented by the probability of 2 red gumballs being selected? This one is easy. The outcome is only a red, and that probability is 49 over 144. So the probability of selecting 2 red gumballs will be 49 over 144. Okay. Now, this sample activity should be enough to assist you with the actual writing assignment that is posted on Campus Cruiser for you to complete and hand in when you come to class. Okay. Feel free to send me an email if you have questions.